My first impressions with the iPhone 15 Pro Max have been great. However, that's somewhat out of the ordinary. I went into this phone knowing that I was going to be extremely hypercritical. It just wasn't a device that's exciting to me, and it's unlike many of the phones that I like to use. You see, Apple has been playing it safe, and I don't like that. I like devices that are out there and feature-packed and a little experimental, and it's why I choose to carry the Z Fold 5 as my daily driver. But this time around, it really does feel like Apple's tried to get ahead of their own curve just a little bit. And if this phone means anything for us, it shows us that we can expect some incredible features and upgrades in the near future from Apple. As always, a like and a sub to the channel goes a really long way. Thank you so much for 25,000 subscribers, and let's just dive right into it. The minute I took this phone out of the box, I was impressed by how light it was. Now, the difference really is only 18 grams by the end of the day, but for a phone this large, it makes it much more comfortable in the hand. I've been using the Fold 5, but because of how narrow it is, it's much easier to grip, and the weight doesn't serve as a problem, but I've always found the stainless steel iPhone 14 Pro Max to just be a behemoth to lug around. Aside from the weight though, physically, not much has changed. Yes, the frame is titanium, but at the end of the day, I feel like a matte aluminum would have felt just as nice in the hand. I do like the look of the brushed titanium on the white 15 Pro Max that I purchased though, and I do feel like it hides the smudges the best. But I don't see this as a reason to upgrade in the slightest. To me, it's just allowed for Apple to throw it around as a buzzword for their marketing, when at the end of the day, there's no real benefit. In fact, this actually kind of serves as a negative for the device in some ways. Because titanium is harder than stainless steel, dropping this phone has almost virtually no shock absorption, and in turn, it can actually do more damage to the device. So while your phone may be stronger on paper, in the real world, if I were you, I would just go with a case. Around the body though, of course we get a USB-C port, which of course, as I'm sure you've all heard by now, uses the USB 3 standard, allowing for 10 gigabit a second throughput. This is crucial to me for connecting to all sorts of accessories. The thing I'm most excited for is recording ProRes directly to an SSD. I've yet to play around with it. However, I've seen some videos and it seems to just be pretty plug and play, and I'm really excited to take a look at it. You can also actually use the USB-C port for display out, which I think is pretty cool, and that's something that's really interesting when it comes to gaming or even using something like a pair of AR glasses. One thing that people are going crazy over, which I'm actually a bit disappointed with, however, is the action button. I don't like it. And it's not because it's bad or has terrible haptics or anything. I just think having a remappable button on the iPhone could have been a game changer, but with Apple's implementation, it feels like an afterthought. The action button could only be used for a single action. You have the choice between silent mode, focus, camera, flashlight, voice memo, magnifier, accessibility, and shortcut, which we'll get to. You do not have the ability to add another function to this button. So if this is your camera, it is only going to bring up camera, and you can't, for example, use it as an alert slider. I think if Apple had implemented a double tap or a triple tap feature on top of using this button as a press and hold trigger, I honestly think that it would have made this action button a really big bonus feature for the iPhone. But as of where it stands right now, I kind of feel like it's useless. Sure, I mean, like, it is pretty cool to be able to just press a button and have your camera open or use it for something else, but I actually just like having the alert slider, and now I kind of have to choose between whether I want the alert slider or something else, and I don't know. When I mentioned shortcuts though, you do have the ability to use the Shortcuts app and basically create any string of commands that you want. Shortcuts is a pretty cool and could be very useful tool, so I'll just put a link to a video down below that can explain it way better than I can. With Shortcuts though, you basically have the ability to trigger any response from like a third-party app or a first-party app, or even do things like home automation. So I actually seen someone on Twitter who used this button to be able to bring up their garage door when they got home, and I thought that was pretty cool, but I'm sure you can do a whole lot more if you actually take advantage of that shortcut mode. On to the display though, it looks beautiful, and I don't really have any complaints, aside from the fact that I wish I didn't have to buy the Pro Max to put up with a larger form factor just to get that 5x telephoto lens, but I digress. It's bright, it's sharp, it has very thin bezels, which I can appreciate, although I'm more so into folding phones, but I think that anyone who's looking for just a larger phone in general and wants a form factor that's tried and true will appreciate the 15 Pro Max's panel. In terms of display spec, it's nearly identical to the 14 Pro Max. It's 2000 nit peak brightness, 460 ppi, ProMotion, but that's not a bad thing. You're getting a solid panel and now technically a slimmer and nicer looking and lighter chassis. So, cool, I guess. I will note though that while they do advertise 2000 nits of peak brightness, don't expect to get that for an extended period of time. I find that these phones dim pretty heavily when outside in daylight, and after about 5 minutes or so of using it when outdoors, it dims pretty bad. And it's not to the point where it's unreadable. It's still a very nice and readable display, but it's definitely not 2000 nits, and it's probably not even hitting 1000 at that point. Although that is just me guesstimating the numbers, so don't take it too serious. Although it does get really, really dim outdoors, and obviously that's to save battery life and make sure the phone isn't overheating. When it comes to the performance of the 15 Pro Max, I mean, it's an iPhone. There's no denying that it's a solid, smooth experience that I can't really complain about. The only downside to this is that if you're expecting a really big jump between the 13 Pro or even the 14 Pro, using these phones side by side, they may feel a lot more similar than you had expected. In a weird way, that's kind of just a testament to how good Apple Silicon is and how optimized iOS is. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just, you're not gonna notice these performance increases like every generation with iPhone. The 15 Pro Max is using the A17 Pro, which is built on a 3nm process, the first in the world if I remember that correctly. Technically speaking, that should mean better thermals with better battery efficiency and performance across the board. But in this case, it has a quirk. This phone gets hot, and I mean really hot, like uncomfortably hot. And in my time using it, I'm kind of confused. I found that when I'm playing games, or if I try to actually record ProRes and then edit that ProRes video onto here and color grade that log footage, I find that it just does not like it. Like it wasn't meant to do that or something. Games on here tend to throttle pretty quickly depending on the title that you're playing, and that causes display dimming very fast. But it also just makes the phone really uncomfortable to hold. And I'm not going to speak on whether or not this is a chip problem, a heating problem, or both of those things together, because at the end of the day, it could also just be a software problem. So I guess we're gonna have to wait and see how this is gonna turn out over the next few months or so. But as of right now, if you're somewhat of a really heavy user, I would possibly hold off on getting this just for now. However, oddly enough, that really hasn't made an impact on my battery life. The first day of using this phone, I was shooting all day in Toronto, filming with my buddy RJ, and we were just using the cameras non-stop. I was shooting log video, I was taking photos with the 5x telephoto lens, I was doing everything in trying to put this camera through its paces so I can do a comparison video with the Fold 5. Throughout doing all of that, I started the day at about 80% and ended it with about 6 hours of screen on time. Now, 6 hours of screen on time may sound pretty bad, but again, I was at 80% and using the phone in a pretty somewhat decently warm day, whilst kind of just basically doing a burn-in test, using the cameras a ton. So I do expect the battery life to be pretty good, and if I had to guesstimate, I would say I'd probably get about 10 hours with my usage, but I'm just gonna have to wait and see for the full review how exactly this battery stacks up. I do want to touch on the cameras for a minute, because this is quite literally the only reason I chose the Pro Max model versus the Pro. With the 15 Pro Max, you have a 5x telephoto, this guy right here. And I was kind of bummed out at first when I saw that it was a 5x telephoto and not a 10x after being spoiled by the Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra and the S23 Ultra. But after using it and seeing the results for myself, I understand. The quality of this telephoto lens on the 15 Pro Max is great, and it even holds up when compared to the S23 Ultra, and in some edge cases, it outperforms it, retaining more detail in areas where exposure could be a challenge. The images I've taken on the telephoto lens put a smile on my face. They're crisp, the colors look natural, and shooting in auto with no skill to get these kinds of results is incredible for me. It's just been super fun to play around with. I will have another video doing more of a deep dive with the cameras, because at the end of the day, I did buy this phone as a tool to use with shorts and TikTok, so I want to see how far I can push it when it comes to video and images. That being said, in summary, is the iPhone 15 Pro Max a good phone? Yeah. Once I took away that pessimism and I really opened up to it, I can appreciate it a lot, especially as a tool for my creative workflow. Am I going to be switching? No. But if you're someone who's looking for an iPhone and you're in desperate need of an upgrade, I think now is the best time for you to do so. I feel like this phone has had some of the most changes since, what feels like forever when it comes to Apple, sadly. But if you're in the market, at the moment, it's a pretty great phone. Anyways, I'll see you all in my full review about the iPhone 15 Pro Max. If you like this video, leave a like down below, subscribe for more content, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out.